Welcome back to the Rebook Parish podcast. Today in the studio, we've got Tom Corcoran, and we are talking all things next generation. Make sure you listen to the end because Tom's got a couple of controversial topics that we talk about in today's episode. Well, hey, Tom, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Melissa, great to be with you again.
Well,
sorry, you're near snow and ice.
We've got lots of snow and ice here in upstate New York, and we can still see some of your snow that you've got in the background in Baltimore.
Yeah, it melted pretty quickly after the snowstorm, but anyway, yeah, upstate New York, you guys get a little more snow, a little more ice.
We're expecting a foot this weekend, so it should be good.
Okay. Wow. We are not.
All right. Well, we are talking about the next generation. So my first question for you is, why is it so important for parishes to focus on the next generation?
This is an original thought with me, but a couple of people have said it before. The reality is if we don't pass it on to the next generation, then they won't receive their faith. For the church to get older, just as like for you and I to get older, we do nothing, right? Right. If you do nothing, a church will naturally get older because that's the flow of life, right? If you want to get younger, you have to be intentional about it. We have to intentionally do things to pass on the faith to the next generation. So why does it matter? It matters for so many different reasons. One, without intentionality, it won't happen. Two, again, it's been said that every generation is one generation from losing the faith, right? As far as, now, I don't think that'll ever happen. Christ said the church would go on, but it's our responsibility to pass that faith on to the next generation, just as the faith was passed on to us from the generation that went before us.
Right. Well, here's the thing, Tom. You get to coach parishes. You get to go on weekend observations and see what parishes are facing in real time. What are some of those challenges you're seeing that parishes face when it comes to engaging the younger generations?
Yeah, it's interesting because I just did a report for a parish, just was finishing up one this morning, our parish we visited. And, I think, challenge is continued communication. And that's always an issue, I think, of communicating the gospel. The gospel is good news. So how do we communicate that to the next generation in a way they'll understand? And that takes some energy and effort to do that. So I think that's one challenge. I think sometimes parishes are challenged by their space, and that, one of the things we advocate is, a children's liturgy of the word. We call it time travelers at Nativity. Sometimes parishes don't always have that. The one parish I visited didn't have a great space for that. So that can be a challenge. I think just the challenge, too, of, again, investing in these programs, because it can become, we get focused on everything else that's going on the weekend, but not putting energy and effort, not being creative when it comes to children's programs and next generation. And obviously, again, we're in a larger culture right now that does not naturally reinforce faith. And so I think that can be frustrating to parishes that, families will choose sports over church and feel like people aren't coming. So it's not as natural in our culture. So it's definitely an uphill battle every parish, every church is facing.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you said sports, that just hit home. I mean, when we were rethinking how we were going to kind of rebuild our next gen programs at my parish here in New York, sports was the number one thing we were contending with. It was, okay, how do we build a program where the travel hockey kids can get there and the basketball kids can get there? And trying to eliminate some of those competing systems is really tricky when trying to engage that generation.
And we can't change that necessarily, but what we can do is focus on making our programs as excellent as possible. We can be and really make sure we're communicating to the next generation in a way they understand and engages them. And also, there is being wise, what times fit, what works in the rhythm of the people in your community. When do you have their attention, or the best opportunity to have their attention, and just building in programs that are going to work in rhythm with people's lives. Although I do think one of the things churches sometimes do that I would debate about is like we create programs and they're once a month or, I think we need a consistency to these programs that we're always there and always available.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what are some of those common misconceptions that parish leaders might have about ministering to the next generation?
I think when it comes, if you start with like youth ministry, when it comes to youth ministry, I think sometimes we're shocked that kids want to be interested in faith. Like, I think we should just come with an attitude of like, no, kids want a relationship with God. High school
Yeah.
students want a relationship with God. That's just in every person. So sometimes it's like, wow, kids actually show up. No, we should expect them to show up. We should have faith that
Right.
they need faith and they want a relationship with God. I think, again, I think some mistakes is not investing in it, not putting staff people on it. And, obviously parishes are always limited in resources, but God's a God of abundance. He can provide resources, and doing with what you can with what you have today, and trying to figure out the resources you have of space, of hiring people, of hiring somebody part-time and then full-time, that you can build that up over time. That I think it's just sometimes a lack of intentionality about it, or a lack of investing resources in it.
That's a great point. Sometimes parishes, and I've seen where they're like, "Oh, we don't really have the money to invest in the next generation." And the one thing that I want to just hammer home to them is you can't afford not to. This is where you should be investing your money and your time and your resources.
Yeah, one of the things we like to say, it's when you invest, and then in kids especially, but any next generation, it's a double win. We have a coworker here used to always say, "You do something for my kid, you do something for me." And especially younger kids are a great way for evangelization. That we do know that parents, when you do become a parent, there is a sort of understanding this responsibility to your child. And for men, again, it's less in our culture now, but many kind of understand, yeah, I should probably give them a faith. I need to give them a moral foundation, and church is where that is. So if churches will provide something, again, especially for younger children, that's why we're a big advocate, again, of a nursery program for little kids, where the kids love coming to church and enjoy it. The parents are going to come too. And kids are unabashedly evangelical. Like they don't care. I love sharing the story of Brandon on our staff, where his daughter invited her teacher to church.
Oh,
She didn't care, right? Yeah. Because she enjoyed the program so much. She invited her teacher, right? They invite their friends. Whereas adults, like, well, I don't want to offend anybody. I know there's baggage. Like, kids don't have any of that. So it really does increase again, kids are great evangelists. And I think if we have great kids programs, it'll bring both the kids and the parents, and then eventually other kids and other parents to church.
That's a great point. Well, Tom, you talked a little bit about space. I want to dive into that a little bit. What are some practical ways parishes can create environments that are going to resonate with the young people?
Well, obviously it depends on the age, right? So the environment and the space you use. So, I can talk a little bit about nativity early on. We were trying to create this nursery program. We called it Kid Zone. Back in the day, we call it All Stars now. But a place where parents could come and bring their bring their kids and drop them off and go to mass and listen. And we're a big advocate of that. And that can be controversial for some people. Some people really believe little kids should be in church. I've quite honestly never understood it, because even as a kid, my mom said, I didn't go to church till first grade, and it's worked out for me. So
Right.
I've never understood that, like, have a program for the kids. But anyway, but I do think parishes should do that. And when we started, there was a supply closet. Now, it was a huge closet, so I don't want to make it sound, but we turned that into our kids' space, like our nursery space. And it wasn't ideal, but we used it, so sometimes places you need to get rid of some storage and use that if you have a big, supply closet or whatever. Now, again, that's got to be big enough. And then, we carved out, just by putting drywall up, we carved out some of our office space and created a space after that. So I think it's just being creative to look around your space, say, where could we bring kids, or and then you need to make it safe and secure and all those things. So, and then, we talk about with the nursery, make it clutter free, don't have Cheerios, and you got to keep it clean, right? I think clean your freaking nursery is one of the things and tools for rebuilding. It needs to be clean, needs to be inviting and vibrant and bright for little kids, right? And then obviously older kids, again, the simple things like we have a ping pong table out in our next gen area, right? Just something like that where kids can play. I was visiting this church and I kind of gave some feedback. They had kids come into, they had tables. They came into a cafeteria and it was a nice space, right? It wasn't bad, but there was nothing on the tables for the kids. The kids were just sitting there. I'm like, well, put a puzzle, put a little Jenga, something, right?
Yep.
Just to be engaging kids, especially again, when you get to boys, especially, you have two boys, Melissa, like like around middle school or elementary, they need to move something. They got to touch something. So, creating a space where that will draw them in and engage them in some way, I think is really important. And I'm by no means the biggest expert on that, for sure. There's others who can speak a lot more intelligently on that.
I love the idea of just putting a game like Jenga or a puzzle on the table just to give them something to do with their hands, because we know what happens when middle school kids walk into a room and maybe they don't know everybody yet. What are they going to do? They're going to sit there and they're going to pull out their phone. But I love that concept of give them something on the table to do, and then it helps give them, it helps them connect. And then, my goodness, they might have a whole hour without screen time. That'd be incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Again, I was at this church looking at it, and that was that. Then I went to the classroom. And again, it was very interesting to see. And they had a pretty traditional kind of classroom, but one, to see the different teachers and their communications, right, or catechists, right, in their communication. And the one could really engage kids. And something, he just knew how to engage, and the other one you could tell didn't. And the kids, they had a book, and this kid had like folded every single page of the book into this like fan, and you just could tell he was, so that's what made me also think about the need for kids to touch stuff, have things. And again, he was a little bored in the class as well, so. Which is obviously something we try to talk about. Is not so much having a class, but a small group and discussion with kids.
Right. Well, here's a question I've got, because, I've heard you say the quote already in this podcast episode, and you've said it before: if you do something for my kid, you do something for me. How can we as parish leaders better partner with parents to support the faith lives of their children?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of people who talk about that and think about that, and there's family programs. We've kind of gone from more just making sure the program for their kid is done really well. So, again, going to this church, one of the recommendations we have is kids are coming into the classroom, have other people greeting them, right? Just greeting them at the door and welcoming them in. Do you have ministers that have a smile on their face, right, when they come into the program? So I'm kind of a belief, again, when we do something for kids, we are doing something for parents. And then I do think also, this would go back to the all-stars, the younger kids. If we do a good homily and we put good put programs on there and give a good message, we're building up parents' faith. So to me, sometimes people will choose between if kids come to Mass or not come to Mass. And obviously, ideally, we want kids going to Mass and to the kids' programs. But to me, if the kids go to their programs and have a good experience and their parents are growing in their faith, then we've done something more for the kids.
Yes.
Because probably the best thing we can do for kids is actually help the parents grow in their faith. So, I know there's different things out there like family activities you can do. I got to be really honest, Melissa. Like I work at a church. When we're given activities to go do as a family, or like there's been things here at the church, and I know, but I just want to say I probably represent a lot of dads.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. So. I think there's some ground to be gained in doing things where you encourage families to go together and do things together. But I'm a bigger thing of do excellent kids programs, nourish the faith of their parents, and hopefully, and you can give parents ideas of how to be a better parent and be better and create an environment where you're praying together at home and do those things. But that to me is the best way, and I know other people again would disagree. So this is probably like the second hot button I've probably touched where you can disagree. And feel free to argue with us, but I do think I represent a lot of dads out there. It's like when you're, some are better there, and there's some are a lot better dads than me, and they would do it and go along. But a lot of dads are like, oh, come on. But if you just pour into those dads and they become better spiritual leaders of their family, I think that's the best thing you can do for kids. So and the family.
I'm with you, Tom. I think that when you can give the kids a great program, and then if you can pour into the parents by providing an excellent homily and a great weekend Mass experience, and the parents are more likely to come back to Mass, then they can be empowered to do other things at home with the kids too. And it doesn't have to be, here's an activity to do at home, but when you lead them in their faith, then they feel more spiritually aligned and like they can, pour into their kids' faith at home.
I would also say, small groups in the homes are another way. So
Yeah.
how great a witness is it that if you have small groups in your parish and then they meet in homes, which I would really encourage, that, we try to move around who's hosting and that kind of thing, but hey, 8 guys are coming to my dad's house, come over and they're talking about faith in our home today, right? Or a couples group and they're coming and talk about faith. To me, that's a great witness. And I do know small groups where families would get together on a Sunday afternoon. And again, same thing. The kids would play down the basement. The parents would talk another small group time. So I think small groups are kind of a big way, too, to be able to encourage kids to see the witness of their parents' faith.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tom, because they can see then, oh, well, as I grow, I'll be in a small group, and being in a small group is something that you do as a part of being a disciple. That's a great point.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be interested in, I guess it is something, and it's reflecting on my own experience, right? I don't think we did a lot faith-wise, like as a family. Like there was no family activity at church that I can point to and say that was really impactful to me. What was impactful to me was I had parents that it was a priority to go to Mass every weekend. I remember one time in first grade trying to get out of it, and my mom made me go, and I never tried again. I was like, okay, this is important here. And my parents witnessed to the faith. We prayed before meals, and my dad did pro-life talks, and so that was huge. And my mom, worked in church. But to me, it was just more the witness of their lives. So I don't know. I kind of come back to that's the biggest thing. And if we can really be making disciples of parents, and again, and I'm sure there's more we can do. But to me, that's the first thing to do. And if we do that, there might be other good ideas off of that. But I do sometimes think we chase like the family program.
Yeah.
Again, some people I know have the family ministries, and I get it. I understand the heart of it. But to me, the best thing is to pour into parents' faith and to pour into those programs, and then hopefully that's connecting at home. That's my thought.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, Tom, from my experience, sometimes the family program is what the parents perceive as the replacement for Mass. Like, oh, I'm coming on Wednesday night to family faith formation. I don't need to go to Mass. Actually, that doesn't count. That's not Mass. And so we actually took that away in our parish. The amount of resources and time and planning that was going into it. And then those kids were in that program were disconnected from the other kids and weren't getting that same great experience. So then the next year we shifted to, okay, all kids now are coming on Sunday night and you're going to have this awesome experience together. And parents, we're encouraging you, get into a small group. If that's the part of that, we want you in a small group, but then come join us on Sunday for Mass, because you're going to get poured into there. And that's where you're going to have your faith cup filled.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I would I would add one thing I think they do well here, for like sacrament prep. So for before First Communion and before penance, they do, they gather everybody together. You bring a parent, and they have a program for kids. Then you go to Mass. And again, the idea is we know there's many people in those sacrament preps that aren't going to Mass, that they want to check the box of the sacraments, but we hope they have a great experience at Mass. They're reminded of, again, there's a good message here, a good homily that's going to help feed them, the music. We hope, everything, the hospitality. We talk about the weekend experience. Then they go back and they have Chick-fil-A and they do some things. So I do think I don't want to totally, knock or disparage doing some of these things. I think there are opportunities to do that. But I do think keeping focused on some of the things we always talk about, like creating a great weekend experience, putting energy and effort into the programs for the kids so that parents can at least worship. I think keep those the main thing is what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit, Tom. So I was looking over the breakout sessions we have for the Rebook Conference, and in every single segment of breakout sessions, there is something focused on the next generation. So tell us, why is the next generation such a big focus at the Rebook Conference this year?
Well, I think going back to where we started, it's so important we reach the next generation, and it's so much harder now. Again, let's just acknowledge that it is hard. It is more challenged. There are cultural currents that go against it, so it needs more intentionality and input than ever before. And again, it's one of our main responsibilities as followers of Christ to pass on our faith to younger people. As I get older too, that younger now, it looks, I just turned 51, so it's interesting now, people in their 20s, that's the next generation of me. That was where I started out in ministry. That wasn't so young. So I do think just a mindset, it's just, any parish to be renewed and rebuilt has to be investing in the next generation and putting energy and effort. And again, a parish, again, what do youth bring? They bring life, right? And they bring energy and excitement. And without that, again, places get very stale and dull. And you feel that, right? When you go to a parish where there's young people around, where there's children around, there's families around, most times there's life and vitality. A lot of times the places that are dying, they're dying because they're literally dying. People are just getting older and there's no one young to replace them. So, I think young people are a powerful symbol too of the life and vitality of the church, and they do stand against in a culture where there is young people go to mass, as we said earlier, or young people are engaged in God. When the outside world sees young people, they do take notice because of this misperception, I think, that kids don't want a relationship with God or that's old fashioned or whatever. So, it brings life and health to a parish for sure.
Absolutely. And what it does even for the older generations, when they walk into a parish that they've never been before and they see all of those little kids walking out for Children's Liturgy of the Word, that says something to them. That shows them, wow, they care about the next generation of kids here. They care about my grandkids. They care about my kids.
Yeah, I remember, and too, high school students serving, I would say that as well. I did a talk one time. We were inviting high school students to serve, and I said, when you serve, it is such an incredible witness, kind of what you're saying about kids and time travelers or Children's Liturgy of the Word leaving. The same thing, when you see a high school student serving, it does something for your heart, right? You're like, wow, they get it. And I think it brings hope to adults. Because again, I think, especially in our world, and I think maybe especially seniors there's something that happens, I see it sometimes in seniors, they get so hopeless about the world. Yeah. Because they see all the problems, and I think you watch more news or whatever.
Probably.
The bad news. I'm kind of thinking my own mom. And, but when you see a high school student serving and loving God and doing that, man, I mean, that just helps out way. There is hope for the next generation. Yes. It's not as, I don't think the next generation is any more self-centered than any other generation. I think we're all struggle with that and have to grow past that. And I think, again, it's up to us to believe in the next generation and, to tell the stories of faith, like Jeremiah. Think about Jeremiah. Say not. When he's called by God, he says, "I'm too young," and God says, "Say I'm not too young. You're not too young, right?" And let's tell the next generation they're not too young to start serving God and to begin building a life right now of service to God. And imagine what they can do in a lifetime of service to the Lord. So. I think what else does it do to a parish? It does people's hearts good.
Awesome. Well, Tom, any final thoughts on investing in the next generation?
Yeah, obviously, we've kind of spoken at a higher level. So, try to start to think about what your next steps could be. And, think about, is there an age you're not investing in right now? I do think if a parish is trying to figure that out, young kids are the easiest, right? It is hard to reach teenagers in high school students because they got a lot going on. They can be a little more skeptical, that kind of thing. But little kids are, we call the low-hanging fruit. So that might be the place to start of a little nursery, of a Children's Liturgy of the Word, if you don't have anything. And then I do think you're looking at what is the communication. How are you communicating to those kids? Is it done at an age-appropriate level? And just, again, the parish I saw, I realized it just wasn't. I saw the difference of someone who could engage kids at an age appropriate and someone who couldn't. And I saw I was able to just kind of give some ideas for how to get better at that. So, and then third, like you talked about earlier, your environments and spaces. Look around your church and see what do you have available for the next generation that you can carve out.
And sometimes, Tom, it's getting super creative with space. So like you had talked about the supply closet and then, taking some space from the offices and dedicating that. And in our case, we got crazy creative. We had a food pantry in the basement of our parish. We moved the food pantry out to another location on campus and remodeled that basement space for the kids. I mean, sometimes it's a lot of effort, but it's time and effort that is worth it for that next generation.
Yeah, it's fine. We took a kitchen out and same thing and created the all-star space at one point. So yeah, it's be creative, put some energy and effort into it.
For sure. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited for everyone to get to see you in person. If they have not gotten to see you in person yet, guys, I got to tell you, he's a lot taller than you think he is. Or maybe I'm just a lot shorter than everybody thinks I am. But I'm excited for everyone to get to see you on stage and pour into them at the Rebook Conference this spring.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. Listen, looking forward to having you there too. It'll be great.
Well, thank you. Well, everyone, we will see you June 2nd and 3rd at the Rebook Conference. Thanks so much.